Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is? Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who like these type of videos, if you remember to click a like down below to offset the dislike, it would be greatly appreciated. But today I'm going to cover a video done by TheSwolefessor, who I've given a couple shout outs to in the past, even though he's a much smaller channel. I feel like the guy puts out high enough quality that it's worth a shout out when you consider that probably 80% of the fitness channels on here literally know absolutely nothing about training programming or biomechanics. They literally know how to use gear. They know how to use gear to build a physique and a bunch of fluff and pump. Swolefessor is actually legitimately intelligent, legitimately strong, knows what he's talking about. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 hat of Speechcraft and let's talk about this. Now, I already saw and I went to watch his video in the comments. They're like, Blaha's going to love this one. Yeah, and I did. It's good stuff. It's the same sort of stuff I've been telling you guys. Because he talked a lot about a lot of the myths between the relationship between size and strength that are out there. And I think it's great that he used himself as an example. Because this is one of the things that I hate dealing with online is when people bring up this pound for pound strength thing. And it's like, and I hate to have to tell you guys this, but when you say someone has really good pound for pound strength, you're basically calling them a dwarf. Right, it's the same thing. And he brings that up. And every powerlifting coach, every expert who's researched strength athletes knows this. This is not even a controversial point. It's not a controversial point. I mean, I've even seen Greg Knuckles write in a thing that basically you're going to get your butt handed to you in a meet if you compete against someone 3 inches shorter than you. You cannot hang with someone who has the same level of training experience that you do in a weight class who's 3 inches shorter than you. If he has trained really hard and reached even close to his potential, he will crush you in competition. You can't do it. And that's Greg has said that. You can't do it. It is not going to happen. Because you're going to have to diet all your muscle off to hang with him. You just won't. So the same guy, if you both weigh the same body weight at the same body fat, you have the same level of training, even if your leverages and stuff are a little bit different, there's a real good chance that guy is going to out squat you by 50 pounds and out deadlift you by 100 pounds. Okay, you're just going to have to deal with it if you're at the same body weight because of the leverages. And he kind of pointed that out, that he said, look, I'm 5'7", and so for a lot of people, they would look at that because 5'7" is slightly below average height. So pound for pound, the guy is really, really strong. And if you're 5'10" and you're trying to compare yourself to him, you're going to have to be bigger and way more than him and have a hair more muscle on your frame to lift what he lifts. And that's kind of what he pointed out. I like that he went there with that. And he mentioned that even for his weight class, he competes sometimes against guys who are an inch shorter than him is really common. And some people don't realize that he's actually somewhat tall for his class. So what I would say to anybody out there, you start talking about strength sports, weight class-based sports, knowing your exact height is probably a real good idea because it starts to matter a lot when you get above the regional level. It matters big time after that. You better be in the right weight class for your height, particularly if you go in completely clean. Guys who aren't on anything, you have no wiggle room on that. You have no wiggle room on that. So he brought that up, and what he pointed out is that when it comes to hypertrophy, people have to remember that the reason you see discrepancies in size and strength in the individual person from one person to the next is leverages and height. Neuromuscular efficiency and stuff like that matters, but it's usually leverages and height. Those are your big determining factors, and those are set for the rest of your life. If once you're done growing and you're an adult, that isn't going to change. Barring some catastrophic accident or a surgery of some type, that is not going to change. Your leverages and your bone structure and your height and your arm length and leg lengths are going to be the same. So when we talk about, well, size equals strength is different for this person to this person, it has to do with their levers. It has to do with their levers. And as far as body weight goes, once you have your technique dialed in, most of your strength gains or strength losses are going to come based upon your muscle mass. So after that, the only thing that's going to change your strength beyond muscle is going to, as far as what you weigh, is going to be the amount of body fat you have. That's pretty much it. And it's to the point to where when you look at some of the research that's out there on it, it's basically been determined that, again, once speed strength, once technique, once all these other things are dialed in and they're on point, that 90% of your strength gains pretty much for an advanced lifter and on comes directly from your hypertrophy, that you can't separate them. The degree of overlap is so massive that there's almost no difference you can make outside of gaining or losing muscle. Now, and I'm not saying explosiveness and speed, strength, and technique don't matter, but they fall to the wayside. Because once you develop, those things are developed. In other words, once you maximize your explosive potential and it's there and it doesn't regress, you can't increase it anymore. Once you have good technique on a squat and you're making good use of your leverages, what happens? You can't really do much more. There's no technique adjustment for someone who has decent technique with a 500 squat that will take them to 600. It just cannot be done. There is no way someone who has the basic form down is adding 100 pounds to their squat by a form change. Someone who has really bad technique could add 100 pounds with a form change, right? But if you have decent form, you're not adding 100. You're basically tweaking, trying to get 20 pounds. Right? To go from decent form to phenomenal form might be worth 20 pounds on a squat. And that's it. You can't just keep saying go from decent to phenomenal. You can't do it 5 times. That's kind of a one-time deal. It just has to do with creating the right leverages. So beyond that, it is about hypertrophy. And as he pointed out, people have to understand that as you get stronger, you're going to get bigger as well. They're both directly related. You can't really separate the two, but what people forget is that you are looking inside the individual person. In other words, 5 pounds of total muscle mass gain on one guy is not going to equal the same amount of strength gain as 5 pounds of muscle mass on a different guy. Now, if they have identical skeletons, because the same height, same arm length, same leg length, same rib cage, it's going to be pretty close. So when people say, well, why can't you just give us a direct comparison between how much muscle you gain versus strength? Because it's dependent upon frame size. And the amount of research we would need to do to give you a formula based on that would require you to probably do very advanced math if it was ever invented. You probably need a computer program to run the numbers for you. And it would have to be something that measures your skeleton and compares you to the skeletons of 1,000 other lifters, right? To find all your different leverages. So it doesn't work that way. So it's inside the individual. But for you personally, once your form is decent and your mobility is decent, there's going to be pretty much a perfect scaling on all of your lifts with the muscles involved versus the size and the strength. It's going to scale pretty effectively for you as a person. So you can't compare the different people. And usually what it comes down to when you see the people with the phenomenal strength versus body weight, or it looks bad, like you'll see a guy who's really big and really jacked, and you go with his pound for pound strength, so he might be a lot taller than you think he is. When you see people in person, all this stuff starts to make more sense. Right? It starts to make more sense, and then you realize what's going on. And then he pointed out, you can look at different lifts, and this is what all the research, like you take the squat, bench, and deadlift. We know that the bench press is most related to body weight. Squat second, and the deadlift the least. And it has to do with the fact that the bench press, there's very little you can do in terms of leverages other than arm length or arching and things. So your raw bench press strength is most correlated to your upper body muscle mass. Also, body fat gains make benching easier, and there's reasons for that from mechanical tension perspectives. It's most positively affected by body fat gain. The squat's in the middle, and then the deadlift the least. In other words, the deadlift is the least correlated with the amount that you weigh. It's the least correlated with the amount you weigh, because body fat doesn't hurt or help it for the most part, or fat gains don't help it, and fat loss might help it in some cases, depending upon your structure. It is the most dependent upon leverages and arm and leg lengths and height out of any of those lifts. And we know that, and the research kind of shows that. But I like that he broke that down. I also like that he went in and talked about the problem we get into with both the pros and the evidence-based people. And that's the thing that I like, because it's something I've been talking about more and more these days also, is that he touched upon that. You know, you have the bros who don't understand because they see a bodybuilder who maybe did a bunch of pump work, and they do this silly nonsense of continual tension because they don't understand mechanical tension. And he basically called it silly. It's a silly theory. It's not really based upon reality. But you're talking about a bunch of genetically gifted guys on a lot of drugs. right? And in that case, they can get away with stuff like that, and then they think it works because they got results. Well, they would have got the same results or better results had they done something different. But it just becomes tradition, and it's not based on reality or how tension works. He gives a good talk about mechanical tension, and then he says, but it's gotten just as bad with the evidence-based people. And he used to say, and this is, I agree with this is something I've come to say more and more, so we see eye to eye on that. Like, this is a smart thing to say. The evidence-based community has become its own clique and its own bros. They really have, to the point to where they want to basically just be lazy and weak and hopefully find a study that will find them a way to avoid working hard, that they just try to look at, oh yeah, I can just use this machine or this or that or these higher reps and not have to lift heavy and get just as big. And the reality is that that doesn't actually work either. And by that same token, just like the other guys don't understand science or biomechanics or anything at all, they will try to use faulty data, biohacks, everything else in an effort to just avoid doing actual work. And again, it doesn't work. And he pointed out the problems with EMG studies and other stuff. And hopefully most of us understand that at this point. An EMG study is not an accurate comparison of two exercises. It really is not. It can put you in the ballpark, but the margin for error is large enough just because it's, again, as he said, it's measuring activity, not always tension, that all an EMG can really tell you is this exercise a good or a bad exercise for this muscle or this muscle head? But you know what? We could do the same thing with biomechanics, right? We could look at the function and where tension's being placed on muscles with an exercise and actually predict what the EMG is going to say already. That's the problem with it. And we're dealing with the activation, and it's so relative to even the weight being used for the individual person that it can make scaling very, very difficult even for reading it on different exercises. So it has a whole host of problems involved with the reading of it, the measurement of it, how to even set up each lift, because the EMG is going to be totally different if you change the weights 5 times for the same person, for the same exercise. It gets really complicated, and it becomes a very, very difficult way to compare. But it can tell you, is there activation and activity going on? But we have to remember at the end of the day, size and strength gains come from actual tension. It is that tension being applied. So I am also glad that he addressed upon some of that with the newest evidence-based practitioners out there, because a lot of it's getting just as bad as the old bros were. It's getting just as bad. They've turned it to ridiculous extreme camps. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.